There is a lot to unpack here as far as next steps and what could happen in court on Wednesday. And joining us now in studio is former King County Superior Court Judge Timothy Bradshaw. Judge, thanks so much for being here this afternoon.
My pleasure.
This breaking news, what's your reaction?
Like most people, surprise, particularly when the judge recently denied the continuance of the trial. I think all folks looking at this this trial and this awful case were expecting some answers and some resolution, perhaps justice, and now those things are placed in a whole different light.
This hearing that is going to be happening on Wednesday, can you shed some light as to what we expect to happen?
Sure. First of all, I'd emphasize that it hasn't happened yet, and I'm sure the trial judge is very concerned about this publicity. Should the plea not go through, not be accepted, that's going to be further taint on a jury pool. So I'm sure the judge is thinking that, first of all. When the hearing happens, if the hearing happens, there are two things going on: the law and the emotions. So the judge's concern will be, of course, the law, and by that, the judge has to make a conclusion that it's constitutional, that the plea is acceptable. So he will be doing a direct inquiry called a colloquy with the defendant to make sure that his understanding of the consequences of the plea are knowing, intelligent, and voluntary. Those are sort of the famous things to look for. And free of coercion. Excuse me.
And as you noted, there's still a lot of time from now until Wednesday. Is there any reason a judge might reject this plea?
If the judge does not conclude those things, that it is not voluntary, that it's a product of some sort of coercion, then yeah, the judge can reject it. The judge has an affirmative duty to make that determination.
As you mentioned, quite a surprising turn of events. A lot of people watching this may be wondering what goes into this type of plea deal. Do they take the victims' families into consideration?
The ultimate decision is the prosecuting attorneys. So the victim's family are not technically clients. So the decision is the prosecutors and the prosecutors alone. However, of course, a prosecutor needs to, under any standard, not just of law, but morality, consider the input of the victims who are aggrieved, understandably. And
one of the biggest things in this case, Judge, has been the motive. People trying to figure out why anyone would do this, right? And if this plea deal goes through and Kohberger accepts the plea deal, as we have heard he has, does that mean that we're closing the door on finding out the answers, potentially, on the motive in this case?
It's a great question, and the answer is a lawyer one. It depends. So one thing I'll be looking for is this what's called a straight plea versus an Alford plea? In a straight plea, the defendant needs to acknowledge all elements of the charges. A Alford plea, it's named after a famous case, doesn't do that. It says, I will likely be found guilty, but I'm not acknowledging that guilt. Furthermore, the prosecutor could require a statement from the defendant to provide some answers. So those things, I imagine, were part of the negotiations, and we don't yet have those answers.
Okay, so the answer is maybe. And Judge, any final thoughts, anything that you'll be watching in these next few hours?
My thoughts are for the family and all involved and what they're going through right now. They were anticipating some acknowledgement, I think, of the truth. They were hoping for justice, and now they have to recast what that perhaps would mean. Plea will give closure. You know, even if the death penalty were rendered in the case, that invites years sometimes of unknowns and appeals. So this type of thing does provide closure, which is good, but it also can rob families of answers. Answers that, you know, the rules of evidence would have allowed, the testimony would have allowed, and all the rest. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Judge, thank you for being here. We're all watching to see what happens next. Former King County Superior Court Judge Timothy Bradshaw, we appreciate your insight.
You're welcome.